Good morning. I am here with Richard Zeitoun, who was president from 1991 to 1992 of the State Council. When you joined the State Council, were you a staff member, management, student?
When I started, when I first joined, I was still a staff pharmacist, but I was just about to become, a year later, I was director.
Okay. And who did you meet that made you want to advance in the organization?
Well, actually, Tony Medeo was my director, and he was heavily involved in the association. And so he kind of lit the fire. And from then on, I remember, I think of the first conference I went to, Wayne Conrad was there, and I met a whole bunch of people from Western New York. And I said, this is because from where I was, it was a tiny little nursing home. There's only two of us. So it wasn't like a big department was taking a table out. So I had met some people from Western New York, and I kind of started a friendship, and that kind of got me going.
So you said you just mentioned Wayne Conrad. How many of the past presidents before you did you meet and what were they like?
Oh, I probably met Wayne was probably the first, and I probably knew everybody else since. I'd have to unjumble the city society presidents in my head from the state council presidents, even though they were pretty much all the same in some regard. But like I roomed with Jack Katrinas, and I was very friendly with Mary Stoics, and Sue Hunt and I were very close. Caspi and I were, we grew up in the same neighborhood, and he went to school with my sister. So, I had a close relationship. Roxy and I were good friends. I had a close relationship with all of them, going back as far as I could. Seymour and I got along, and Gil was the only one that I really didn't get along with. He was in another category. But Bernie and I were friends because we grew up kind of I worked in the neighborhood where he grew up in, and so yeah, I was pretty friendly with most of the past presidents.
All right.
Steve and I were the only two guys that went to Bronx Science that ended up at as a pharmacist and in the association. All these years later, I don't and I'm still an alum, active alum. I don't know of any other, a lot of doctors, physicists, authors, politicians, but as far as pharmacists are concerned, I don't know any others except for me and Seymour.
There's one PhD student in history that actually is from Bronx Science.
Oh yeah,
That's my son.
there you go.
Okay. What challenges did you see as a member, board member, and president?
Oh, my biggest challenges were more geographical. At that time, I'm just trying to think. We still had, as a member, it was getting to meetings and getting involved in some of the committees was as a member. I pretty much moved up from there into different ranks, and I was lucky because, I was under Kurt's wing and Alan's wing for a while, and so Kurt kind of guided me into the association organization and the committee structure, and so I moved up pretty quick. Plus, I was pretty active at the time, so I spent a lot of time getting involved, and Bernie was involved with the legislative committee and such, and he kind of handed that off to me. So that was my precursor to running for presidential office. And so that was basically how I got involved. My challenges as far as a president was concerned was corralling a bunch of independent minds, which is probably still the case. When you're on a board meeting, I guess a little different now in that we had board meetings for a couple of days. It wasn't like a 3 hour Zoom or a discussion for a half a day. At that time, board meetings ran 2 days or a full day and a half, and it was an overnight, so wherever we went. The other challenge was, as an officer and involvement, you went to every chapter. So you went to Northeastern, you went to out west, you went to Erie County, you were all over the state. And so that was a bit of a physical challenge away from work and such. Other things was at the time there was a challenge because we were converting, so to speak, into a more modern association. We were getting away from Bob Stevens, and I'm trying to remember who was the exec before Bob, and into more association management. So that was a transitional period there,
I think
if I
Knight,
remember correctly. Huh?
Knight, is Knight the exec secretary, or oh, what was his name?
He was an attorney. I don't remember. Uh, he was out of Albany. I just don't remember who was before Bob. But anyway, so that was during that period we were in transition. And so Ed Bell, he was up front. He was my right-hand man as exec secretary, I guess, if that title still exists. And so he would do upstate stuff and I would do downstate stuff. We had some challenges along that road, but basically it was more, like I said, transitional. We were moving from the old collegial point of view to a more structured association point of view. We were on the verge of CDT, of CEs. And so we were, and at that point, sorry about the dog, he's commenting and he wants a cookie. We were on the verge of, hold on one sec. I'm just going to mute you for a sec so I can give this guy a dog, give the dog a bone, so to speak. Actual give the dog a bone. So that was my memory of the time as far as what kind of obstacles I faced. We were flush though. It was the time when companies were still allowed to contribute without more unencumbered. And there were golf outings and luncheons, and so all the stuff that would be what considered the déclassé at this point, but
Yeah,
or
yellow, I think yellow laws, something like that.
and Kurt and I were just developing at that point the structure for corporate contributions and things. So it was just at that time that those things were going on.
Okay. Um, Membership always seemed to be a problem. Do you remember what members wanted at that time?
We like I said at that point, membership wasn't as much of a problem because the directors had more leeway in encouraging staff members to become members. It wasn't until like when it was right before CE was required, if I recall, or in that era. So we were just starting to lose members, and we were, consolidation of the hospitals and departments were no longer requiring their staff members to be members. So that was just the start of that. Before that, we were pretty flush with members up until just about the time that I became president. It wasn't that difficult until a little bit after that, and then it became a little more of a problem.
Now, you said you
You
had
remember, we
two-day
used to
board.
have two annual meetings, and they were full. It was a place to get together and stuff. So.
Mhm. You said you had 2-day board meetings. What were they like? Were they organized? Was there camaraderie, professionalism?
The two board meetings were business meetings. They were real good didactic discussions. There was nothing that was not on the table. I mean, it depended who was chairing. My style is a little different than, let's say, Roxy's style or Jack's style or Mary's style. Every president directed the meeting in a different direction. For me, I couldn't sit down. I would walk around during a board meeting. I couldn't sit there for 6 hours. It was nuts. But there was a lot of fine point discussions on issues. Remember, we were just trying at that point to figure out what to do, what to call a pharmacy assistant. Was it really a pharmacy technician, and what kind of role did they have, and what do we do for ratios inside an institution, and arguments with the board of pharmacy, and remember we were much more. There was a lot to do. It was a central meeting, and a lot of stuff was done because we didn't do a lot of the preliminary work that you might see today via fax, email, Zooming, phone calls. There you got packets of material, and you were reviewing reports that people actually typed up and put together. And so it was a little bit of a more old world transitional, like I said, it was really start of the transitional period into more electronic communications and such.
Was there any major mishaps or issues that showed up in your presidency?
For us, for the pharmacy world, no, not that I mishaps, not that I recall. I mean, the world was at war, and it was the first Gulf War period, so it was kind of strange in the United States at the time. I really can't tie that into anything. I mean, I think part of the discussions I recall were pharmacists' involvement in physician-assisted suicide, whether or not it's ethical to supply the medications. That was, it was just because Oregon, I think, had just passed their rules about it. So it was, but as far it was more preliminary to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis now, but not disruptive that I can recall. Other than, like I said, we had changes in the association structure. That was kind of, and there was always issue with budget and funding, but that's just normal day-to-day stuff.
Okay. The annual assemblies, we just talked about the fact that we had two major meetings. There was the annual assembly and the major clinical.
Right.
The annual assembly, you were installed. Do you remember who installed you and where it was?
I don't remember. I don't remember who installed me. I really don't. I would have to, I guess it was Mary, I guess, because she was the president right before me. So Mary Stoics would have installed me. Um, and it was at the
And-
Sagamore, um,
Okay.
that I recall. I'm pretty
The
sure that's
reason
where it was.
one of the reasons I ask is I've spent the last few months going over hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures. So
Uh-huh.
I see everybody as they were much younger.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. My hair and the dark color and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I just couldn't remember who had installed you. Usually it's someone from ASHP.
Yeah, Dave Almquist. He would have done it.
Okay. Yep. I
Yeah.
mean, he did it. There was Henry Manasseh at times, Joe Otis.
Yeah, but it
Um,
was it was Dave that we were really good friends, Dave and I, in those periods
okay.
he was around a lot.
All right. What do you remember about the assembly and as a president? Did you feel it was like nonstop, chaotic, or just all fun?
Um, I remember it being nonstop from early when you first got up there to the time you last session when you left for the presidential officers. It was a lot of fun. You got to remember, like I said, CE was not the core requirement then. So you went to classes because you wanted to go, but there was a lot of like breakaways to do other stuff, like go into town. I remember my wife set up a Japanese tea ceremony for the spouses. Um, so it was more of a get together than and the clinical is more clinically oriented. So the annual assembly was some politics because we had to get through the assembly itself. as far as passing any new rules, regulations, debating any policy changes. That, mission statement was, again, I think came up during that time period. It came up every couple of years. So there was a good business portion, but there was also a heck of a lot of camaraderie and fun. Remember, those were the days when you had company suites, and there was, I can see now there's an alcohol statement on the website. That the only alcohol statement we had at that point was who's bringing most. It was just a different time frame.
Okay.
And where was the toga party going to be?
Okay, we won't get into all of those things. Couple of last questions. Generational changes. You and I are from the baby boomers. You've got the Gen X's, the Gen Y's, the Gen Z's. Their philosophy is very different than ours. Do you think the council is in good hands with the Gen Z's?
Good point. I haven't been to meetings in a while. I am impressed with the quality of the clinical programs these days. So I think that from the point of view of education, and let's go with education and research, they're probably sharper than we were in that regard, more detailed. But as far as work ethic is concerned, maybe the presenters are of an ilk we would identify with, but not the general population. They're a little bit different, but that's just my general feel. I don't have a good sense of it. Other than that, I'm usually impressed with the presidential officers, their savvy, technological savvy, their clinical savvy, but I don't know about their overall understanding. But that I haven't been in enough of the meetings to make a judgment on it.
Okay. Any final nuggets or classifications or things that you want to
Well,
impart to
Ted,
future?
the funny part of it is, I was thinking about all those things that, preliminarily to this, what I remembered. And as I said earlier, I remember the collegiality and the friendship. It was really friendly, family-oriented stuff. When the Saturday night event broke down, it was usually like families dancing together and hanging together, and the kids would come up, and it was more a family get together. And I think that's basically how the association kind of evolved and then devolved afterwards, when it no longer became financially viable. When departments were no longer paying for travel or attendance, and it became harder to scratch up people. In the last few years, I had to pay out of pocket for myself. It becomes pretty expensive when you have to do those kind of things. So that kind of put a more realistic, I guess, spin on it, more current, realistic spin. But like I said, it had really evolved into a nice family get together with spouses and kids, and good times, along with really dedicated people trying to get things done. We spent a lot of time on issues like starting up for the clinical role of a hospital pharmacist or a pharmacist in general. Prescribing under protocol was a hot topic. If you think about it, 30 years ago, it didn't exist. So, nowadays, there's pharmacists on every team, and they're really assisting. So it's a different world in that regard. So, but that's pretty much how I remember it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Rich. With that, we
Thanks,
will
Ted. Good to see you.